We all want to be more productive, right? I mean, nobody wants to waste time. None of us has extra time to spare, especially if you are a busy working mom like me. Then time is of the essence, and you've got a huge, long list of demands that are constantly on your heart and on your mind. And today I want to share with you my number one productivity tip. This is something that is so unconventional. I would be willing to bet you've never heard of this method, and it actually runs super contrary to most productivity advice you've probably received. If you're curious, if you want to know more, then definitely stay tuned, and be sure and stay tuned to the very end of this video because there are some very important caveats that you've got to know in order for it to be successful. Hi, I'm Amber with Solutions for Simplicity, and I'm sure you're wondering, who is this lady? Who is she to talk about productivity and advice and all that stuff? Very fair question. Let me just begin by saying that I am a busy working mom of 3 kids ages 6 and under, and I've shared in other videos, but I, used to have this great system and be super productive and have it all together before I had kids, and then kids have just totally changed everything. But my job hasn't changed, my needs haven't changed, and I've had to get super creative to figure out how to make this all work. Remember to check out my Why You Should Be Productive video, because I hit home in there that our self-worth, our value, is not at all related to how productive we are. I care about being productive so that I have more time for who and what I love. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing with you everything I've learned the hard way. Now, if you are new to my channel, big welcome. I'm so happy to connect with you. Please take a minute and subscribe down below so you don't miss a single one of my videos. I make new videos every week all about prioritization, productivity, time management, and that elusive thing we call work-life balance. Everything I share is specifically geared towards other busy moms like me, but I promise these tips are invaluable for anyone and everyone that has a lot going on. With that said, let's dive in. Drum roll, please. All right, my number one tip for increasing your productivity is to make yourself uncomfortable. You heard me right. One of the best ways that we can hurry up and do what we have to do is to light a fire under ourselves in some way. And I have found 2 different ways of doing this. They work great by themselves or even better in combination. I'm going to share all of this with you, break it down, so hang with me. So often when we have a lot to do, we are paralyzed either by uncertainty of where to start and which thing to do first, what is truly top priority. As a side note, check out my How to Prioritize video where I give you some very important tips for knowing which things are most important. But aside from that, we also struggle with, I think, being lazy, right? And if we've got lots of time before something is due, we think, oh, I've got that. I don't need to start now. I don't need to worry about it. I'll get to it later on. So we've got to have a plan in place. Don't forget that I have put all of my best wisdom for how to prioritize, how to plan into my ultimate guide to planning, which you can check out from the link below or on my website, solutionsforsimplicity.com. But let's back up and talk about why making yourself uncomfortable is so essential. I used to think procrastination was a really bad thing, right? And I used to see people that would have their work done well in advance of the deadline and seem like everything was so smooth, they were never stressed out, and those people are awesome. If you are one of those people, I'm amazed. Tell me your secrets, right? You can let me know in the comments below. But I think for a good chunk of us, 90% of the population, right, we are prone to procrastinate. And we procrastinate for a bunch of different reasons, some of which are very natural and normal and can be explained, right? But the other time, I think that we actually procrastinate because we don't have that pressure on us, right? And so a lot of us, myself included, thrive under pressure. We actually thrive when we don't have time to think about anything but the task at hand, which is why this method of making yourself uncomfortable is so helpful and successful. To dive deeper, we know from research on things like Maslow's hierarchy that procrastination makes a lot of sense because biologically and psychologically, we have this hierarchy of needs, and oftentimes the things that we are doing or the tasks in front of us, they are way high up on this hierarchy. They're not fulfilling basic immediate needs like sleep and air and food and shelter, right? And so it's very easy to put them off or to think we'll get to them down the road. But I'm here to tell you today why procrastination can actually be a really positive, useful thing if it's done right. All right, so the first way that you can increase your productivity by making yourself uncomfortable is to wait until the last minute. Actually do that procrastination. Don't feel bad about it because what you're doing is then being realistic. You are only giving yourself a short time window to get what needs to happen done. And that way you don't have time to waste anymore. You don't have time to worry, to overanalyze, to think of a million different ways that you could or should do this, and you don't have time to get distracted. You have to focus. If you know that that deadline is coming up, then the only choice you have is to sit down, do the work, and then it's done. Now, it might not look the prettiest in the process, and you might have that knot in your stomach and that adrenaline running through your veins, but I have found that for me, that is actually one of the best, most motivating things I can do. That's how I thrive. That's how I'm able to get done all these different things, is I don't give myself more time than things should take. So much of this comes back to something known as Parkinson's law. If you've never heard of that before, it makes so much sense once you know about it. That's the idea that tasks expand to fill up the amount of time that we give them, right? And so, when we have something to do, if we have 10 hours to do it, then we could actually use all 10 hours. We don't feel uncomfortable, we don't feel pressure, and we might dilly-dally, we might mess around a little bit, we might just sit there, we might be working and then get up and do something else. But ultimately, chances are very good that whatever we need to do could and should be done in far less time. So I want you to push yourself. I want you to limit the amount of time that you give yourself to do something, especially for things that have a deadline. If you're one of those people that can get things done way, way, way in advance, awesome. But chances are that you didn't need to be that on top of things, and you could have been using your time for other, even more productive things ahead of time. What I think is so helpful is to know when the deadline is coming and then specifically schedule in the time just before the deadline where you're gonna get that thing done. Phrased differently, what I'm saying is that sometimes one of the worst things we can do for our productivity is to start something too early, to allow it to take up more time than it should. And I've talked about this a little bit as well in my biggest productivity mistakes video, so be sure and check out that series as well, because I've got tons of other good productivity tips there, and I break down a lot of things that many of us do without even realizing it that destroy our productivity. So check out those videos. But again, we don't have time to waste, especially as a busy working mom. Time is of the essence. And I don't want to be spending any longer on something than I should. I want my time for my kids, for my husband, for my family. And so I want to make sure that I am hurrying up to do all these things that, yes, I still need to do, and I'm still doing them well, but I'm not giving them any more time than they're actually due. Now, for example, as this applies in my realm of work, I teach on a regular basis, so I need to come up with new lecture slides and updated class material and all of that. And I love teaching so much. I could genuinely spend hours and hours, if not days, prepping for each class. But I've had to get really brutal with myself, and for the longest time now, what I do is ensure that I only give myself the few hours before I teach to prep for class, to update my slides, to make sure that everything is set in my lecture notes, or that I, print off copies and I get materials, I plan the activities. This forces me to be super productive and efficient. And honestly, I feel like my classes have gone so much better when I do this, because I then am pumped up. I'm ready to go. All of this is fresh in mind. When I show up for class, I've just come out of planning everything I wanted to do, and class has just been going awesome. To give you another example, one of the other ways that I try not to let things take any more time than they should is in the realm of meal planning. And in my former life, I used to love to cook, but now I need to get dinner on the table in as little time as possible, and it has to be something that is very fast and easy and that my kids will eat and that meets our family's dietary restrictions. You can always check out my other video where I give you some ideas of things that our family turns to meet these criteria. But my point is that I could spend 2 hours or more making this elaborate, wonderful meal for my family, but that's not my reality right now. What I need to do is give myself 20, 30 minutes or less. What can I do in that time? And then that way I'm also thinking ahead of time about how I can prep and get all of that together so that when I have those 20, 30 minutes, all I need to do is focus, make dinner, and it's done. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's move on to the second way that you can make yourself uncomfortable as a means of increasing your productivity. That is to have consequences in place for what happens if you don't get this thing done. For instance, it's so helpful to have an accountability partner or something where you're setting yourself up for embarrassment or even failure if you don't do this, do it right, do it on time. Now, this can sound really harsh, and I'm someone that, for better or worse, really does thrive on the approval of other people. I definitely have been working on this. It's one of my many issues, right? But I think all of us have this inherent need and desire to belong, to have others' approval and appreciation. And so that power is something, that pull that we have is something powerful that we can actually use to our advantage when it comes to being more productive. If we know that we're gonna be humiliated in front of other people, if we don't have our you-know-what together, or if we know that we might lose out on some income, or we would miss a really important opportunity, all of these things are examples of how we could make ourselves uncomfortable if we knew that those kinds of things would be consequences for failing to produce what we're supposed to have done. To give you an example of how this can play out, I wish I could remember where I heard this example from, but someone was saying that the most successful gym idea would be to be a place where people had to take a naked picture of themselves when they signed up, and they had to set their goals ahead of time about how much weight they were going to lose by a certain time, and then the gym would hold on to that picture, and if the person didn't meet their goals by the deadline, then the gym would release that picture out to the public, right? Now, obviously, this kind of place doesn't exist, thank goodness, but you get the idea, right? How much more motivated would you be? How much harder would you work? How much more productive would you be towards achieving your goal if you knew that that kind of thing was a consequence for not having it together? Now, most things in our lives aren't that extreme, but again, getting uncomfortable, feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this, and there's something big that'll happen if I don't, that can really increase your productivity like no other. Okay, so here's the kicker. Both of these things work wonders on their own. I've tried and tested them, and again, this is the method that I use all the time. I kind of alternate back and forth between, knowing that I only have a few hours until something is due, and then doing work when I know there's a big consequence if it doesn't happen. So I like to kind of switch around which method of making myself uncomfortable I use, but I will say that the best results seem to come when there is a combination of these two things together. If you both know that the deadline is fast approaching, you have waited until the last minute, there's no time to lose, and you're on that race to get something done, and you know that there's a major consequence if it doesn't happen, you will be amazed at how productive you are and how much you are just surging with energy and focus and motivation and discipline until that task is completed. The reason all of this is so effective is because we are humans, right? We so easily let our feelings and our emotions and all the kind of little things that are going on in our minds take over. But when we don't have time to waste and when we are really motivated by something, when we have no choice but to be productive, then the rational side of our brain kicks over and we kick those feelings and emotions to the curb as best as we can, right? And that does enable us to focus. New chemicals are emitted in our brain that allow us to do our work with even more attention and detail and energy efficiency. We're so much more effective and productive. Now, before you rush off to try all of this yourself, definitely stay tuned until the end because there are two very important caveats to implementing this method that you need to know about in order for it to be successful. The first caveat is that whatever you're supposed to be doing needs to be something that you have done at least one other time before. We need to have some sort of baseline so that we know how much time it could or should take, and that way we can race against the clock to get it done even faster than we've done it before. We don't want to set unrealistic expectations and set ourselves up for failure unintentionally. We still need to be smart about how we're using our time and how much time we give this task. The trick is just to not give it more time than it really needs. The second caveat is that this method works best with small to medium-sized things that you've not only done before, but that don't have major life-altering consequences associated with them if you somehow don't get it done. You certainly don't want to try this method with something where your job is on the line, right? Or your relationship is at risk if it somehow doesn't happen. You also do need to be realistic, right? We want to be productive and focused, but not unrealistic with what we're undertaking. So for instance, if your goal is to run a marathon, you don't want to wait until a week or two before the marathon is supposed to happen to start training. Similarly, if your goal is to write a book, right? That's a huge, big, ambitious, and wonderful goal to have, but you've got to give yourself time to reach those kind of goals. What I'm talking about here is a method you can implement with something that is finite, concrete, and you know you can get done if you just dedicate the amount of time it should take. All right, so that is my top productivity tip for you. I am so anxious to hear what you think. I can't wait for you to try this out for yourself and let me know down below how it worked. Or if you've done this before, is it something that you push yourselves to do on a regular basis? Which of the two strategies do you think you would take? Are you more likely to be productive when the deadline is fast approaching or when you know there's embarrassment on the end of failure? Either way, I just want to thank you again for listening. I hope you found this helpful. If you got value out of this video, then as always, please give these videos a thumbs up. It helps my channel so much when you like these videos and when you subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers as quickly as I can, and everyone counts. I'm so grateful for those of you that are following along on my journey, and I'm just so excited to share everything I've learned the hard way in hopes that it helps you too. Once again, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram. I am constantly posting behind the scenes views of my life and even more productivity, time management, and work-life balance tips there. Until next time, thank you so much. I'll see you in my next video. I'm so excited for this one. All right, so the number one way that I have found is in, I can't talk. Don't forget that I have that's not a word. So much of this come back, but, or if we know that we might lose our job, or That's a bad example. Can't use that one. Or that we could be susceptible to criticism if we... That's a bad example too. Now again, remember that being productive is not tied to... But we can really see how that fear of being uncomfortable, how that... Until next time,